and welcome to an extended edition of the I-24 News Desk. I'm Batya Leventhal. Thanks for joining me as we take a look at some of the top stories making news at this hour. We start here in Israel, where the Palestinian Authority Health Ministry has said that 2 Palestinian men were killed and a third was injured by Israeli fire in the city of Nablus. Palestinian gunmen in a passing car opened fire on Israeli troops near the city early on Friday morning. It came just moments after the military announced it was easing a blockade on Nablus following major gains against a local terror group known as the Lion's Den. The Israeli military said the soldiers who shot at the cars had been in the area as part of routine operations involving ambushing Palestinian attackers and part of its larger counter-terrorism operation Break the Wave. The IDF operation was launched following a series of terror attacks in Israel and the West Bank between March and May earlier this year. And joining me right here in studio to help break this all down is Raphael Jerusalmy, a former senior intelligence officer in the IDF. Thank you for your time this evening. I want to start by saying that it's another day of violence in the West Bank, and this is supposedly after the IDF lifted its blockade on the city. Is the violence ever going to let up?
It will let up in the end. There is less violence than there was a week ago, but it's still going on. We haven't finished dismantling the Lion's Den. The Lion's Den terrorist group has had a lot of failures lately, and a lot of its members have been either arrested or eliminated, but they're still active, and they are not the only ones. There are a lot of lone wolf actions, and the other terrorist factions are still working on the ground, Islamic Jihad, especially in Jenin, and the Hamas. So all in all, there is still a lot of work. What did happen last night is very interesting, because we lifted the blockade, and then there was this ambush of attackers. They were shooting at paratroop soldiers that were on the checkpoint, but there was, in the dark, there was a force that was ambushing attackers, and this means that with proper intelligence, proper preparation and deployment of ambush parties and patrols, there might not be such a need for a blockade. This blockade was inside even the IDF. There were arguments about whether or not this blockade was efficient and necessary, because the danger is that the blockade creates bitterness amongst a population who is not part of this violence, this wave of violence. Many Palestinians just want to go to work, just want to go to get their medical treatment. They are not interested in attacking Israeli soldiers or Israeli settlers, and they are being collectively punished, and this is dangerous, because the thing that we most want to avoid is a popular uprising. So far, there's been a lot of violence, but this violence is first of all contained. It's only in the West Bank. It hasn't come into Israel, not even in other cities of the West Bank. It's like mostly Nablus and Jenin. It hasn't gone to Ramallah. So we want to contain it, and we certainly want to avoid any popular uprising, any discontent of the majority of the Palestinian population as to what's happening right now. And that blockade might not have been the right move. There are other ways to deal with terrorism, and the collective punishment doesn't work. The economic, socio-economic help or humanitarian help works much better, as we see in Gaza. Right now in Gaza, it's very quiet, and the Hamas itself have made their calculation as how much they really need the Israeli help, and that Gaza people can go and work into Israel, and they're now very quiet. So we are learning, we've suffered terrorism for many years, but we're still learning, because terrorism, like anti-Semitism, has many faces, and it changes faces and changes shapes. Right. And each time we have a different kind of terrorism. We had lone wolves, we have knives, we had people with cars ramming into the checkpoints. Now we have these Lion's Den. So each time we have to adapt.
And just briefly, I wanted to ask you how this ties into the elections that are upcoming on Tuesday. We're talking about the fact that this may have been a small part of the operation that is now falling apart in terms of the blockade that's now been removed, but it's not the end of Operation Break the Wave.
No, certainly not. And professionally speaking, the security forces and the IDF are doing their job independently of any political agenda. Of course, for Prime Minister Lapid, it's a good thing when the IDF scores. It looks good because Benjamin Netanyahu, his opponent, main opponent, criticized him exactly on that point about security. You're not Mr. Security. I, Mr. Netanyahu, I was always Mr. Security.
Absolutely. Raphael Jerusalmy, former senior intelligence officer in the IDF, thank you very, very much for your analysis as always.